This summer, I returned to about a dozen boxes in my garage. They were papers and books and other remembrances from my parents' house we emptied last summer. Among them were many, many, many letters from my Grandpa Morris. You see, Grandpa Morris wrote lots of letters. He had beautiful handwriting, and much to his chagrin, my sister and I, not so much. His elegant cursive filled aerograms, birthday cards, onion skin paper, legal paper, formal stationery with his office address or his home address. When I studied in Israel for the first year of rabbinical school in 1990-91, Morris mailed me an aerogram each week, and he numbered them. His life wasn't so exciting at that point. He was 92 when he went downtown from the Bronx once or twice a week, but he managed to make amazing stories come true. My dad's visits to him and my grandma and the groceries he brought, particularly the deli, if they went down to theater, if somebody came to visit them, and of course, the Yankee scores and the New York Times headlines. Many of these letters have outlived him, and this summer I turned to rereading them. And you should know that my grandfather lived to be almost 103, so you can imagine how many letters. Among the standouts, the one that made me cry was the one a month before my rabbinic ordination, when he actually thought he might get there, which he did. And then there were these incredible notes that he would write after family occasions, after Seder, Thanksgiving, and particularly after birthdays and anniversaries. He would write to my parents and to my sister and me and thank us. He would thank us for being a devoted son, daughter-in-law, granddaughters, for spending time with him and my grandma, for celebrating whatever the occasion was and making it meaningful. He didn't have to. We weren't particularly formal, and we spoke to my grandparents every day. You see, my grandparents and my parents were inveterate thank you note writers. And they raised my sister and me with a very high bar that I'm still trying to meet. And as my kids know, it's a very high bar. My mom wrote some amazing notes that some of her friends saved and have come back to me in the boxes from these houses. One of her friends recently sent me a letter that she wrote to her friend Patty decades ago, I think somewhere around 4 or 5 decades ago, that thanked Patty for being a good friend. I continue to try to match this high bar, I haven't matched it, and encourage my children to do the same. And I've often wondered, my grandfather lived, at least in my years, with an incredible sense of gratitude. Certainly his life wasn't an easy one. He came over on a boat in 1901. He grew up on the Lower East Side in a tenement. He was the first kid on his block to go to college. My great-grandfather was a shop foreman in the garment industry. My grandparents, during the Depression, with my dad, their baby, moved in with my grandmother's parents because they had no money. So life wasn't easy. But my grandfather did live with gratitude, perhaps because he was humbled by the realities of life, perhaps because he lived for more than a century and saw what happened in the world. Perhaps it was his parents, who I never knew, or perhaps just who he was. Perhaps, too, because gratitude is a really Jewish thing. You know it, actually. Think about tonight. This is why Cantor Goldstein, I added that Shehechianu, right? We had Shehechianu after naming Ava, after blessing Julie and Adam. We sang Selah, the end of a prayer of thanks, hoda'ah, of gratitude. That's just in this service alone. We say Shehechianu in the beginnings of our holidays, on firsts, on joyous occasions. The hoda'ah, the prayer for gratitude, is in our daily liturgy 3 times a day for those Jews who pray that often. And every morning we have in our liturgy a prayer that says, Modeh ani lefanecha. I thank you, God, for returning my soul, or in other words, for giving me life. We have hamotzi, the blessing before eating. And in this week's portion, we read, when you have eaten your fill and are satisfied, bless Adonai your God. This verse is the kernel around which Birkat Hamazon, raise your hand if you went to Jewish summer camp ever, This is the verse around which Birkat Hamazon, what we might call the grace or blessing after meals, was formed. In fact, Birkat Hamazon, as those of us who went to Jewish summer camp know, is super long and has lots of verses and lots of expressions of gratitude for the land of Israel, for some for the coming of the Messiah, if you'd like to go there. And but at its heart, it's about eating, having food, God willing, being satisfied, and expressing gratitude. Basically a long thank you note for our food. To what end? In Torah, the gratitude is to God. It's super clear. For the land, for the food, for the acknowledgement that our ancestors didn't get to the promised land on their own. God helped them. I've had too many conversations with too many of you to know that not everyone here is comfortable with a belief in God. But whether we call God God or whether we acknowledge that there's something greater than us, we all know that there's stuff in this world that's beyond our control. And I would argue that whatever our belief, we can express gratitude for things in our lives and acknowledge we didn't get there alone. For as hard as we work and as much as we can do and control, there's so much that we can't control. We know it. We see it every day. So gratitude, while complicated at times, some of it coming from good moments and some of it coming from challenging ones, gratitude is important. And so for me, well, maybe it comes with a job, but it's more than that. I am a big fan of God. But gratitude is there for all of us. But why? Well, for one thing, it's good for us. In Pirkei Avot, the sayings of our ancestors, it says, or really asks, who is rich? Izahu Ashir, one who is content with what they have. Think about that. Who is wealthy? One who is grateful, who is content with what they have. And as my dear colleague and friend Rabbi Andrea London writes in the Musar Torah commentary, gratitude is good for us. It makes us more compassionate, helpful, and kind. We see in our world every day too many rough edges, too much tragic loss, too much fighting, too much intolerance. Can't fix it all. But we can take a page out of Grandpa Morris's book. We can stop and write a letter or an email or even a text to someone to whom we're grateful. Or we can stop before or after a meal and say a blessing, and if you don't know the blessing, just say Baruch Atah Adonai, thanks God for the food. Or we could look out at the lake or something else beautiful, large or small, in our world, open our eyes and our mouths and just say thank you in a voice loud enough for someone else to hear that we are grateful. Create your own thank you note, whether it's written or spoken or sung, but stop with gratitude. Imagine the impact if we all start doing that this evening and do a little bit more of that each and every day. Shabbat Shalom.